All right. Well, hello and welcome. Thanks for joining me today. My name is Matthew Cushing, and I am in Duke's Parking and Transportation Services offices. I'm here today to answer any questions that you have about how you're going to get to Duke, what it's like to get to Duke, and the many options we have. You can definitely drive and park, but there's lots of options for getting to Duke in kind of alternative ways. And I am happy to talk to you about that. So I'm looking forward to speaking with you. All right. So first question, is it necessary to buy a car in Durham? Um, Most people would probably say yes, if I'm honest with you. Um, I would say there are definitely ways not to have a car in Durham. If you are, it's going to be very important that you kind of choose your residence location um, with transit or biking in mind. Um, we do have a resource that can help you do that, and I'll probably reference that a few times today. You'll see me pull up this URL. If you can see this, it's parking.duke.edu/housing. That's a map that we've put together that shows some of the most common bus routes to get to campus, and some just places like grocery stores, potentially apartments, things like that on there. This is not a comprehensive list. This is not everything that exists, and you'll need to do some research on your own. But this is, um, I'm sure we'll talk about that more and all of the resources that are available. Um, but if you do not want to have a car in Durham, you do not have to. Um, so like I said, we'll talk about that more, but on to the next question. Are bicycles available on campus? Unfortunately, we do have a bike share right now, but or the funding is unsure moving forward. It looks like we're going to be losing it. So there's not an easy way moving forward to just pick up a bike on campus. There are bike shops nearby. So if you would like to get a bike, there are some good ways to get one. There's bike racks all over campus. In many parts of campus, there are bike lanes and places you can bike. But unfortunately, it's not as easy as using a bike share for like an hour to get between class. You'll actually have to own a bike as is currently. All right. How, when, and where can I purchase a campus parking pass? So parking on campus, we haven't quite updated the prices for like next year yet. What I can tell you is starting for this upcoming semester, for almost all occasions, grad students will be in the Science Drive garage, which is a new garage kind of on the southwest corner of campus. It's a spanking new building. It's really nice. It's got ample parking, and there's even places for like EV charging, electric vehicle charging. It's a nice parking lot. This current academic year, the yearly cost for that parking lot is $444. Like I said, we're still working to kind of finalize next year's costs, so I can't say exactly what it will be. But that is pretty much the lot that people will be assigned to. Another thing we'll talk about, if you do want to open up uh, kind of your parking options a little bit or to make a cheaper option, you can carpool. If you join our formal car share program, so you actually like sign up for it, and I'm happy to answer questions about how you do that. Basically, you get access to a few other parking locations on campus, and the cost goes down considerably. If you get 4 people in your carpool, so in total, the driver and 3 other people, you can actually park for free. So I'm happy to answer any more questions about that as well. Um, let's see. Uh, so which international airport is closest to Durham? The good news is there is an international airport pretty close to Duke. The RDU, Raleigh-Durham Airport, is an international airport. I would say that it's smaller than some. It's not like a Chicago or something like that. You might have to transfer to another airport, but it's close. If you drive, it's probably maybe 15 minutes from the campus, maybe 20, not very far. Um, there is a way to get there by bus. I'll be honest, I don't think it's the most convenient. There's 3 buses you have to take. You have to take a bus from Duke to Durham Station, from Durham Station to the Regional Transit Center, and then from the Regional Transit Center to the airport. I think it takes a little more than an hour if your transfers are like perfect. Um, The good news about that is, though, students can get a Go Pass, which lets them ride any of the regional buses for free. So if you do want to do this and you have the time, then it's basically a free way to get to the airport. If not, of course, there are taxis. Durham does have Uber and Lyft. From my just quick looking on my phone, it looks like it was about $20 to $25 on Uber or Lyft to get to the airport. But it's definitely possible to do, and you can fly internationally from there. Next question. Are there any bus and light rail stations inside the campus? Light rail, no. There is some conversation that, probably 9 or 10 years from now, there might be some kind of adjacent to campus, but in the immediate future, there is no light rail. Bus stations, there are. There are a number of bus stations. Some buses, like the 400 and the 405, kind of go on the outer edge of campus. The 20, the 6, the 11, a lot of those go directly through campus. Whether they're convenient for you will depend, again, kind of where you're living. I'll take another moment to put up that URL of parking.duke.edu/housing. This will show you, again, the buses that are most convenient to get to Duke. You can start further away and transfer to one of these buses to get to Duke, but I would highly recommend, if you would want to ride a bus, checking this link out and trying to find something along the routes that are specified there. And also, in addition to the Go Triangle, the Go Durham, the regional buses, the buses that are outside of Duke that go into Durham, Duke has a transit service that it runs as well, interior to campus mostly. It does go a little bit outside of campus. So if you are on East Campus and you need to get to West Campus, that's a little bit long of a walk. But there are buses that run all the time that can make it a really easy trip. And a few that go to like LaSalle Street and Maureen, which are a lot of people there are a lot of people who are in apartments over there. And you can ride onto the Duke grounds directly from the Duke Transit bus. Okay, so next question, how much is parking on and around the Duke campus? So again, for grad students, basically next year you will be, you'll have the option of parking in the Science Drive garage if you want to park on campus. And that this year, this academic year, this will probably change next year, but it's a good ballpark figure, is about $444 per year. There are some people, it's probably more popular with employees, but what they'll do is if they live further away, they might park at a regional park and ride. So you might hear me reference or Go Triangle buses. There are some ways to park at basically like a shopping center and then catch that bus to Duke. That is usually free, and students do get free parking, or not, excuse me, not free parking. They get they have the free Go Pass, so they can ride the transit for free. So that would make parking at the park and ride free, and then the transit ride itself free. But if you want to park directly on campus, it should be something like $444 at the Science Drive garage. So another question about the airport. I did say before there are some a bus route you can take to get to the airport, but it does take 2 transfers, 3 different buses, and a little more than an hour. It is worth noting, in addition to that, and like Uber and Lyft or taxis, there are 3 times a year. So let me make sure I have these exactly correct. But for spring break, for fall break, and for Thanksgiving break, there is a shuttle. So those Duke Transit buses I was talking about before, there is a shuttle that goes from campus to the airport. You do have to sign up for that ahead of time, so you can't just spontaneously take it. But there is a shuttle during a few times a year to get to the airport as well. But otherwise, I personally would recommend like Uber or Lyft, but you can do a free bus ride as well if you have about an hour and 10 minutes. Is it a bikeable campus? I would say it depends on how comfortable you are on a bike. If you are on campus, I would say that it's a very bikeable campus, especially because kind of the main connector between the main parts of campus, so there's East Campus, West Campus, and Central Campus. Campus Drive has what are effectively bike lanes, and it's low traffic. There are some buses that go down it regularly, those buses I was talking about. Um, Generally speaking, most people don't feel too threatened there. You do have to, again, be aware that you're interacting kind of with buses occasionally. I would say otherwise, once you get off campus, it really depends what direction you're coming from. Personally, I'm a cyclist myself. And I would say that if you're coming from the area around East Campus, you're coming from downtown, or you're coming from southeast of campus, it's pretty bikeable. There's bike lanes or low speed roads. Regardless, though, in this area, I would say that if you're going to be biking, you should be comfortable being around traffic from time to time, if not regularly. So if if this is going to be your first time on a bike, I would recommend maybe being as close to campus as you can. Once you're on campus, it's not so bad. Once you're off campus, there are some good connections, but you should be comfortable with traffic. Okay, closest parking lot to the chemistry annex, and our first year students allowed to purchase a permit for that lot. If you want to park really close to that, you will need to carpool. You'll need to ride with people in. Otherwise, you will be in the Science Drive garage, and that's essentially where all the grad students will be parking. So I do believe that the chemistry lot is included there, but if you want to check the list of what's available for carpooling, you can go to parking.duke.edu. There's a commuting options button and then a carpool button, and it will show you the lots that are that kind of get preferred parking for carpooling. And basically by helping us save parking and helping with our carbon neutrality goals, things like that, we make it a little easier. So check into that, but otherwise you will be in the Science Drive garage. Next question, is public transportation free for students? Yes. So the bus system, the regional bus system, so you can ride it to Raleigh, you can ride it to Chapel Hill, you can even ride it west towards like Hillsborough. That all comes with the Go Pass that students get for free. Now, usually you do need to request this Go Pass, so you need to pick it up from the Parking and Transportation Services office. It's not hard to do, but if you don't do it, then you can't just walk onto the bus and they'll just let you on because you're a Duke student. If you are riding Duke Transit, which is again internal to the Duke campus mostly, all you need is your student ID. But if you would like to ride any of the regional buses, you can for free. You just have to request the Go Pass. Let's see. How is the public transportation? Is it convenient? That's a pretty it's a value. Like it depends what your preferences are. I've lived in some bigger cities with kind of light rail or heavy rail, and I would say that if you're comfortable with buses, it's pretty good. I would say that the problem is there's some areas that are hard to get to. I would say if you are in one of these areas where the buses serve, it's really easy to do, good service. You can track your bus on GPS using something called the Transloc Rider app. I'll put up a link for that if you want to look too. But basically, any of the buses in the area, including the Duke Transit buses, if you have a smartphone or you want to check on a computer, they have a GPS app in every bus. So you can see, let's say you're 2 minutes late to the bus stop, you can see if you've missed the bus or if it's right around the corner. So there's some good things that really help. And if you are near one of these locations where bus service is frequent, then I think it's a really great way to get around. I would say, for instance, though, personally, what I found trying to help people find service is that if you live in like North Durham, a little bit hard to get to Duke. It takes a long time. It's possible, but it takes a while. So if you want to use transit, you can. Please do look at parking.duke.edu/housing to see the routes. I think if you do that, you can find service that works great for you. If you don't, it might be a little more challenging. Next question, is it impossible for graduate students to live on campus? I had to check this. This is not something that my department really does, but my understanding is that there is no graduate student housing on campus. There's apartments and things like that nearby campus, but there is not any provided graduate housing on campus. Where do most graduate students live near East Campus? This is the next question here. I don't have numbers on where they live. What I would say are probably popular locations. LaSalle Street and Marine, northwest of campus, there's 2 roads that are served by the Duke Transit Service. So the LaSalle Loop bus can take you into campus. On Irwin Road, I think the apartments there are a little more expensive. I don't know. But I think that's popular because it's so close to campus. On 9th Street, which is kind of west of East Campus, I think there's a lot of popular apartments there. There are some that are further out that kind of require either driving or using a bus. So near Patterson Place is kind of a shopping center with a grocery store and some restaurants and things like that. There's apartments nearby at Patterson Place, and you can catch a bus. South Square is also the same. There's a lot of shopping, and there's some apartments near there, and you can catch a bus in. I think those are somewhat popular as well. What I would say is keep in mind, especially if you're not going to have a car, proximity to grocery stores. And what I've done recently is I've added to that edu/housing map, I've added some of the most obvious grocery stores. I'm not going to say that all of them show on the map, but the ones near campus you'll see. So for instance, if you live on Irwin Road, which I mentioned before, there are ways to get to a grocery store. I would say you're probably going to be catching a bus. It's not super easy to walk to a grocery store from there. You would definitely need like a cart to carry your groceries or something, like a personal cart. So keep that in mind. I would think that's kind of an important thing there. Do graduate students typically have cars? I don't know the numbers for that. I do think that kind of Durham more generally, most people have cars. Again, if you don't want to have a car, there's a way to make that work. But keep in mind being close to grocery stores, being close to bus lines, and also just depending what kind of social life you'd like to have. If you are the kind of person who wants to go into downtown on a weekend, you might want to live near East Campus, because then you can ride. There's a bus called the Bull City Connector, which will take you into downtown. That depends on your preferences. But you don't have to have a car. Just choose your residence very carefully if you don't, because not every location works. Next question, please tell us about the most dangerous places around Duke. That's another thing that I have a hard time really saying exactly what the most dangerous places are. What I would say are there are a few resources that can help if you're concerned about safety. I'll start with the transportation related one. And basically that is, of course we have the Duke buses for most of the day. At night, the service starts to cut down a little bit. We have 10 daytime routes and 3 nighttime routes. If you need to get from like the library to where you live, if you're in the service boundary, and I'll show you this in a moment, there are Duke vans, which works sort of like Uber or Lyft, where you can request a ride, and they'll take you kind of either to your parking lot or to your residence, as long as you're in the service boundary. And you'll see me refer to this URL a lot during this live chat, but at that parking.duke.edu/housing link, you have to click on the option, but one of the options is to see the Duke van service boundary. So if you're concerned about maybe having to walk back at night, and you think it might not be safe, if that concerns you, try to live in a place that's within that service boundary. Then you can at least kind of have a ride back more often, and that can help a lot. In addition, though, there are some other services. I think it's the police department who made it, but I'm not positive. There's an app called the Live Safe app. It allows you to communicate easily with like campus police and things like that. But it also has kind of a cool little option, I think, where if you're walking back, you can turn on the app and share your location with someone else. So they can actually kind of make sure you make it home or wherever you're going. So that's another thing that kind of makes it feel a little safer, probably helps. I think that's where I'll end with that one. Yeah. Next question. Do I need to buy a car to go to the Chinese supermarket? I had to do some research on this one, to be honest. I I can't tell you the quality or selection. What I did see is there is a store that seems to be more than a Chinese grocery or supermarket. It seems to have lots of different like international foods. Um, I've not visited. I just found it on Google Maps, like Li Ming's Global Market at South Square. You can ride the bus route 400 or the 20 to that. It's in South Square. Um, yeah, so if you try it, you want to send me an email later, let me know if it was a good option. That'd be great. Hopefully that would work for you. If you do live near the 400 or 20 routes, it'd be easy to get to the 400 from Irwin Road. Then that would be a good thing to check. And I believe that the International House, the iHouse, provides group rides to the Chinese supermarket from time to time. So I don't know if it's super regular, but that would be worth contacting them about. I believe I'll be referencing them probably later again. They've kind of said it was okay. If you'd like, this has a link as well, but at the bottom is an email, just their generic email, ihouse@duke.edu. They're a great resource for international students. I'd highly recommend checking them out. Just iHouse again at duke.edu. Let's see. Next question here. Okay, I have a family with 4 small children. We're looking for a house, townhome, or apartment in a safe area that allows me to walk or get some easy access to convenient and reliable public transportation. So what are some recommendations for areas to look to bus routes or continue building around our search? Family specific, it really just depends what you're looking for. I would again reference that parking.duke.edu / housing tool. If you want to walk, again, it's probably Irwin Road, which I think is a little more expensive. 9th Street, there's something southeast of campus as well. If you're looking for a more kind of suburban feel, you might want to look northwest of campus where the 6 or the 11 go. It's hard to say without knowing kind of what kind of lifestyle you'd like. But check parking.duke.edu / housing, and you can at least see what are the most common buses. Walking to campus, you're probably going to be either near East Campus or southeast of campus. If you want to ride transit, though, it opens up your options quite a lot. Okay, how good is the transportation system, and is there a bus system between Duke and UNC? Again, I think it depends what you're used to. If you're used to light rail or subway, you might not be as excited. If you are comfortable with buses and you are going to locations near buses, then I think it's great. To answer your question specifically about a bus between Duke and UNC, the 400 and 405 are actually some of the more popular routes just generally in the area, and they travel specifically between Duke and UNC. There is also a bus that's oriented towards students, so it probably works well for a lot of people, called the Robertson Scholar, which operates every 30 minutes, more or less. I mean, the schedule does stop, but it operates every 30 minutes. And it goes directly from Duke to UNC. So there's no stops in between. So it's very fast service. The only problem with that one is if you're going to be using it regularly, it does not run when school is not in session. If you're going to be here all year long and you want to go to UNC during a break, the RSX, the Robertson Scholar Bus, is not a very good option. But the 400 and the 405 run all the time, and they're good options. Okay. How long does it take for a person to obtain a U.S. driver's license, given that the person already has a foreign driver's license? So this is where before I mentioned I'd probably bring up the International House. I've done a little bit of research. I would really recommend contacting the iHouse. It looks like generally, if you have a foreign license, you can use it here. They do not, North Carolina does not accept the international driver's license though. If you're going to buy a car here, though, you actually do need to get a North Carolina license. But what I would check, and this is a URL again, it's kind of a longer URL, but basically if you search for the International House at Duke, and check for their transportation guidance. They have a page that talks about transportation. There's kind of a checklist talking about whether you need a license here and what process you have to go through. And like I said, there's the email. They've said if you have any questions, feel free to send them an email. Yeah, I think they'd be a great resource for you. Next question. I'm considering living in Chapel Hill, specifically at Weatherstone Drive. Are there any good public transportation options to get there from Duke? We got this question a little before, so I was able to look into Weatherstone Drive particularly. So I'll start and take a step back and say Chapel Hill, especially if you're near kind of downtown Chapel Hill, it's very easy to catch a bus to Duke. Weatherstone Drive, when I looked on the map, is not very close to downtown. You can catch a Chapel Hill bus, which is free, to downtown Chapel Hill, and then catch the 400 or 405 to Duke. Overall, that commute looks like it takes about an hour and 20 minutes. So I wouldn't personally call that very convenient. It is possible. The other option, if you do want to let's say you don't want to pay for a parking permit, you can drive to Patterson Place, which is kind of northeast of Chapel Hill. You can type that on Google Maps and find it very easily, Patterson Place, Patterson. There's a park and ride there, so you can park there for free and then ride the bus in. But otherwise, I would personally say that's not a super convenient location for transit to Duke. Okay, next question. Can I use the free Go Pass to access the public buses outside of Durham? Yes. And there are some places that are easier than others, but like if you want to go into Raleigh to visit it for the weekend or the day, you can easily catch a bus from Durham to Raleigh, Chapel Hill as well. There are some other locations. There's a popular destinations flyer. I don't know if I have a link for this ready. This is a longer link as well, but this is something that Go Triangle or Go Smart provides that tells you numerous locations that you might Duke. It's gosmartnc.org/university-travel. And you'll see that there's like a mall in the kind of the southern area of Durham that you might want to go to. There is a bus to get there. And this link will show you how to do that. So it's not to say you can get everywhere in the triangle very easily. Sometimes there are too many transfers, but you can get to a lot of interesting, popular destinations for free using the Go Pass. Okay, next question. Is there one central campus at Duke, or are there other campuses? So kind of in the main Duke area, Duke is all over, but in the main Duke area, there is 3 main campuses, and they're all kind of right next to each other. So the West Campus and the East Campus and the Central Campus. The Central Campus is mostly, not exclusively, but mostly like residences for undergrad students. So probably you'd be spending most of your time on West Campus. East Campus, I believe, is where freshmen usually live, undergrad freshmen. So I suspect most of the time you would be on the West Campus, but there are the East, the West, and the Central Campus. It's easy to move between them with the buses, though, and even if you bike with Campus Drive. Next question. Can I visit Duke before the acceptance deadline? So generally, I think you can. It's not Parking and Transportation that's coordinating that. I would say contact your graduate department or the graduate admissions office and ask for more details. I would suspect that usually you can, though. Okay, next question. As a PhD student, I might be required to stay in labs late at night. What are the commuting options for late night, and how safe is biking at night in Durham? Well, I'll take that in kind of 2 separate questions. First, if you're in the labs late at night. So commuting options, I'm going to read that as like if I'm using a bus or a bike, but I'm also going to talk about driving. So I did mention before that graduate students almost exclusively be parking in the Science Drive garage. Um, Depending where you're going to be located on campus, you might need to generally take a bus or have a longer walk to get to your where you'll be working. Um, the vans I mentioned before are a good way to get from the lab to the parking deck. They'll both be in the service area. But if you are coming in, let's say that you're going to start working at night. You're going to come in at 7 p.m. and work till 11 p.m. If you have a parking permit on campus, this already includes night access to an expanded number of lots. But even if you don't have a parking permit, it's possible to get a night permit, which is currently free, which will allow you to park at night and on the weekends on campus at more lots. So that is an option you can use. I would say if you're going to work really late at night and you're not going to drive, you're going to use a bus. Check the particular schedule. Not buses in this area are not running until 2 a.m. or something like that. If you're going to be working very late, you might need to find a different way home. If you're going to be biking, in general, I personally, but I am an experienced cyclist, I would say that it's a relatively safe place to bike if you're going northeast or southeast of campus. If you're going to be crossing over, a highway or using some sections of Irwin, I would say that it's not a great place to be biking at night. It's possible, but you really need to be comfortable in traffic. I would also say definitely like you're going to need lights, things like that, bright clothes. But if you're looking northeast or southeast of campus and you're an experienced cyclist, I would say it's very possible. I think that answers all parts of that question. Let me make sure I haven't missed anything. Yes. Okay, so next question. What is the cycling culture like on campus? Are there any particular popular routes and areas? I'll answer this in kind of two ways. When it comes to there's like recreational cycling. There's some really excellent stuff in Durham. The American Tobacco Trail is like I think it's a 25-mile trail that is, you have to cross some roads, but it's usually off-road. I know recreational cyclists, not just at Duke, but in Raleigh and Chapel Hill and Durham generally, really like riding there. As to the kind of commuter culture, there are a lot of people who do bike to campus. And I would say there are a lot of people who do it. That's kind of where I'll say. I won't say that everyone's doing it, but if you are, biking in near rush hour, I do a combination of a bike and bus myself. I see a lot of other people riding in on the way. We're going to try to keep building that up too. So if you come and you want to help build the cycling culture, check in with me in my department. We'll see if we can put any ideas to work. We have events kind of throughout the year, especially during Bike Month in May, when a lot of students aren't there. But we do have some bike-specific events as well. Let's see. So this seems like it's a question aimed towards the cycling culture again. I hope I'm answering your question appropriately. Are there particularly popular routes and areas to live as a cyclist? I don't know if there's like a cyclist enclave, so to say. If you're really into the cycling culture, I do know northeast of campus, so northeast of East Campus even, there is a bike co-op, a good place to kind of go in and tool around on your bike and, just hang out with like-minded people. I know that, downtown, there's a lot of cyclists as well. I don't know if they live there. But yeah, I would look kind of northeast of campus towards the co-op. But I don't know where, I'm sure people live other places. They're cyclists as well. See, next question. What areas should we look at for accommodations if we want to walk or use public transport, and how expensive is public transport? So I'll flash that URL again. There's lots of different areas. Briefly, if I'm running through them, I would say the popular ones are off of LaSalle Street and Maureen, on Irwin Road, uh, near East Campus and 9th Street, directly southeast of campus, potentially downtown. Or you could look at something a little further away if you're fine with transit and not just walking, like Patterson Place or South Square. Those are all really easy to get to Duke from. There is, if you look at the Route 20, kind of in southern Durham, there's a way to get to campus easily as well. But these are all on the parking.duke.edu/housing site. Even if you don't, choose one of the apartments, for instance, that might be shown on this, you might want to try to find a residence near one of those routes. If we bring a car to campus, do we need to get it registered in NC or get an NC? This one I don't actually know the answer for. I'm assuming based on what the research I did for the international students, if you become a North Carolina resident, you will need to get a North Carolina license. I don't know what residency requirements are though, and how that relates to students. So I would check maybe with the DOT. That would be a good way to do that. The Department of Transportation or the DMV, the Department of Motor Vehicles. But I believe if you are not a resident, you don't have to, but I would check that. How available are parking passes, or is there anywhere on campus where there is free parking? The area around Duke generally is, it's built up compared to the areas surrounding it. There's not really a lot of free parking. I mean, of course, if you live in a neighborhood nearby, you might have parking provided. Generally, if you're going to be parking at Duke, there is some cost associated with it. And like, I know, for instance, the VA, which is not part of Duke, but it's near the Duke Hospital, it also is very restricted on parking. So you will have to pay most likely. There are, let's say you don't want to park every day. You don't want to get a yearly permit. There are some day passes that you can get. So there's visitor parking in like certain lots, but also you can go into your parking.duke.edu account and get $7 day passes for a good number of lots. But generally speaking, you're going to be paying at least $7 for a day of parking, but there is hourly parking available in some places as well. Do I need to get a campus parking pass if I have my own vehicle? It depends if you're planning to drive it to campus. If you are, then yeah, you will need to get a parking pass, even if it's a day pass. It depends how often you're going. So I probably should have done the math. I didn't, but the parking pass for graduate students has an annual cost this year of $444. It might change in the next year. But you can kind of do the math and decide, if I'm coming 3 times a week, is it cheaper to get a $7 day pass, or is it cheaper to get the annual permit? And keep in mind, again, there are carpool permits which heavily discount parking. So like, especially if you might want to live with a roommate or something like that who goes to Duke, it's a really good way to get to campus more cheaply if you're going to carpool. And like I mentioned before, if you can get 3 other people in your car, so 4 people in the car in total, you can actually park for free. So that is the one way to park for free. Otherwise, I mean, if you have 3 people in the car, it's still pretty cheap. I think it's like $75 for the year per person. So there are ways to get cheaper parking, and that carpooling does expand your parking options. You get more lot or more facilities that you can park at. But you are generally going to be parking, if you are going to be parking on campus with your own car, you are going to be paying. Or if you rent a car on campus, you're still paying. Where do grad students park when they have to use the library and other services? So it depends on the service you're talking about. If it's at night, the night permit makes it a lot easier to park in a lot of different parking lots all over campus. It opens up considerably because there's fewer people on campus. If you need to come during the day, some places will have like a visitor parking specifically for their own service. There are some visitor lots that are more general purpose and also have a cost. Um, Usually what I would say is probably the kind of the day-to-day use is you would probably park at, if you did drive, park at the Science Drive garage and then catch one of the Duke Transit buses. So there's one that goes directly up into West Campus, and there's one that goes directly into Central and East Campus from the Science Drive garage. So that would probably be your kind of day-to-day way of getting to appointments and things on campus. But there are some situations where there's another option. Let's see. Okay, so the next question has a few sections. I'm going to break it up here. How do you sign up for a carpool parking pass? You can't just, if you just get some people in the car and you don't sign up for it, you don't get any of the benefits. The carpool parking pass, I'll talk about it for a few moments here, and I'll introduce another part of the carpool parking permit that I haven't talked about yet. There's a few benefits. One of the ones that people like a lot is with carpools. Right now, every participant in the carpool gets each month 2 occasional parking passes for free. What that means, so you do have to have a car to be eligible for this. So it can't just be one person has the car and everyone else does not. But if everyone has a car, they can each get those occasional parking permits. What that means is, let's say on, I don't know, on Tuesday of this week, your carpool partner has a doctor's appointment. That means they're not going to be able to take you into campus. Then you can use one of your 2 occasional parking permits. You just go online, you choose the location you're going to be parking at from the list of eligible lots, you print it out, you scan the little paper at the gate, you put it in your car window, and then you're parked. So that's a benefit of that, besides the cheaper cost and more available lots. The way you sign up for it, there's an application. So I do not believe we've started to accept for the upcoming semesters yet. I think that's going to be around June or July. I have to confirm that. But once we've started to process those, what you'll do is you'll go to parking.duke.edu. I think I might have, let me see if I have a URL available for you for this. But parking.duke.edu, if you click on commuting options, this will list all of your alternative transportation options. I don't have a particular URL, but parking.duke.edu, then you go to commuting options, and then you can click on carpool. This will explain all of the eligibility criteria for you there. And at the bottom of the page, there's an application. So there are some things that do, like, you will not be eligible if, let's say, you're the driver and you live 20 miles west of Duke, and the person you're trying to carpool with lives 20 miles east of Duke. So you have to go really far out of your way to pick them up to go to Duke. That's something that would not be eligible for a carpool. And there's more requirements. So it's easier to just look again at parking.duke.edu just parking.duke.edu, and then commuting options, and then carpool. Let's see, I think there's another part of this question. Do I have to pay for a bus pass every semester, or is that cost already included in tuition? So students get the Go Pass for free. It is a yearly pass, so you will have to renew it occasionally, but it is free. So all you have to do is request it and you get it. There's no cost. Yeah. So next question, how safe are the city buses? Safe is always kind of a question that depends on your preference and comfort. I don't feel unsafe on the bus. I mean, I'm also riding, usually around 9 to 5. So there's a lot of people, it's daytime. But I mean, there's a bus driver there, there's cameras. I would say the bus itself is, I wouldn't be too worried about that. Yeah, it depends how comfortable you are riding a bus through, an area that's urban, and because it's not a huge city, but it is a city. If you're not comfortable with that, then you might not like the buses. But I would say that they're comfortable and safe. So let's see. If they're a school bus, is it free? So I'm gonna take that to mean like just buses to get to Duke. So yes, there are many of them. You can get the Go Pass for free to ride them. Again, you can find the routes that are most popular or most convenient to get to Duke, I'll say, at parking.duke.edu/housing. Yeah, and it is free if you get the Go Pass. Next question, how safe is driving with regards to the ability of other drivers in Durham? So when the roads ice over. So basically, is it safe to drive here when the roads ice over? What you'll find, I've lived in some more northern cities. Being a southern city, a lot of things close when it snows here, even a little bit of snow. I wouldn't personally call the drivers tremendously experienced with ice, but often things are closing. So you don't always have to drive with drivers in ice, and there's not a lot of snow here. This last winter, I think we got one time where snow stayed on the ground, and the second time we got snow, it was melted by the end of the day. So snow or ice are not going to be major considerations here, but because of that, people aren't always as familiar with it, and we don't have quite as much, salt for the streets and things like that. So how far, next question, how far is the campus from conveniences like supermarkets and restaurants? I'd say relatively close. If you are talking about from kind of a walking perspective, it can be a little bit longer. From East Campus, it's pretty close. 9th Street has a grocery store, 2 grocery stores nearby, actually, a lot of restaurants. If you go down Main Street to downtown, there's a lot of restaurants, and downtown has a lot of restaurants. That's a little bit of a walk. If you're comfortable riding a bus, either the Bull City Connector, which goes from down Irwin Road from near the hospital to downtown, then it's a quick ride, and the bus runs regularly. If you want to be walking to all these places, though, I would really highly recommend looking again at parking.duke.edu/housing and looking at least the groceries listed there. It doesn't list all the restaurants. There are some restaurants on Irwin Road near the hospital as well. There's not a grocery store. If you live on like LaSalle or Marine, there is a grocery store over the highway, but it's not a super pleasant walk. There's no sidewalks to get there. There is a bus, the LaSalle Loop, that Duke Transit runs that can get you up there. Yeah, so I'd really highly recommend kind of starting with the grocery stores. But if you're comfortable riding a bus or biking, getting to like downtown, for instance, is really easy. Let's see. Is there a bus system on campus? Yes, so the Duke Transit system, 10 daytime routes, 3 nighttime routes, and at night it's supplemented by Duke Vans, which operates a little bit like Uber or Lyft. We have vans that'll come pick you up and take you from, like if you're doing something on campus to maybe your residence if it's in the service boundary. If you want to see that service boundary, I keep referring to this link, you'll see it a lot today, parking.duke.edu/housing. You do have to click on the service boundary. It doesn't show up by default, but it's an option over on the side. But yes, there's a bus system that is very popular, very, very popular, actually. How many students drive to campus for classes, and is there parking for them? I don't know the number. There is parking at the Science Drive garage. You may, if you park, depending on where your department is, you may park and then catch a bus on the Duke Transit line into campus. So you're probably, in most cases, not going to be parking right in front of your department. You're probably going to be either walking, or if you have like a folding bike, you can put it in your trunk, or you can catch the buses, which seems to be kind of the default way of doing it. Let's see, where can I find more information about the public transportation system in Durham? So generally speaking, you're going to, there's kind of a family of services called the Go Triangle. There's a few ways to define this. Go Triangle services are broken down into little communities of service as well. So there is like Go Durham. Most of the buses in Durham are going to be in the Go Durham system. And if you just search Go Durham, in like Google or whatever your preferred search is, you can find the Go Durham routes and schedules very easily. Just remember that if you're going to be going like from Durham to somewhere else, so if you're going to be going from Durham to Chapel Hill or Durham to Raleigh, you'll be looking at Go Triangle. They sound similar. They do. They're from a user experience, they're very much the same. You use the same Go Pass to use them. But if you look at Go Durham, you'll only see routes that are in Durham. You will not see the ones that go to other areas. So do check out Go Triangle as well. Also Chapel Hill, if you tend to travel around the area just like on the weekends or something, they have their own transit system as well. Chapel Hill Transit, I believe it's called. I can't tell you as much about that one. But there's a few different sources, but Go Triangle and Go Durham are going to be your most useful ones. What is the traveling time between campuses? Actually, thinking about this when I'm doing it. I usually am biking when I do it, and I give myself 10 to 15 minutes just because, there's some stop signs and things like that. Probably it's more like 10. On a bus, I would suspect it's similar. I'm usually keeping up with the buses on, but it depends where you're coming from. If you're coming from near the chapel, kind of the core of West Campus, it's a pretty direct bus ride. If you're coming from near the hospital, the routes are a little longer because they have to kind of go through campus a little bit further. But I wouldn't say more than 10 or 15 minutes at maximum. Of course, you have to wait for the bus, but during the day, those are running pretty regularly, oftentimes, within 10 minutes of getting to the stop, if not shorter. Let's see. What transportation method should we take to get into city center, and what is the duration and frequency of this? It really depends where you're coming from. If you're coming from the heart of Duke, it's going to be different than if you're coming from Irwin Road. If you're coming from Irwin Road, for instance, like near the hospital or near LaSalle Street and Marine, or even near 9th Street, the Bull City Connector is a good way to get into downtown. Basically what it does, if you look at a map, is it goes into downtown Durham by Main Street. It crosses the Highway 147, I believe at Anderson, and then it goes down to Irwin in front of the hospital. That's a pretty direct way to get into to downtown. But you can also catch the 6 or the 11, depending where you're coming from. Some of those go through campus, actually. The 400 and the 405 work as well, but they're kind of paralleling part of what the Bull City Connector is doing. It's going down Irwin Road. But like, let's say you're living at one of these kind of further busable areas, so like Patterson Place or South Square. You can get to downtown by riding the 400 bus. It'll take you to Durham Station, and you have to walk a block or two to get into kind of probably where you're going in downtown, but it's definitely doable. So it really depends where you're coming from. What I would say, it's great when, and anyone can send me emails or ask me questions after this as well, or give me a call. But one of the services that I use all the time to just see if I want to get from here to here, you've probably used it in some way before, is google.com/transit. You can also use this through just Google Maps. But basically, if you go to google.com/transit, you put in your starting and your end location and the time you're trying to do it. It's pretty accurate. They have all the bus routes updated. They'll tell you about how long it should take if there's transfers. Check that if you're going to be in one of the locations we haven't talked about today. It really does give you a good sense of like, is this a reasonable option for me? Yeah. Let's see. Especially if you're kind of following that route on Irwin or Main. During the day, it comes very regularly. There's buses all the time. I ride the 400 or the 405 myself, and like during rush hour, they're 15 minutes apart. I don't know each one of them, but the Bull City Connector is a very frequent service as well. Let's see. Can you name the more popular residence areas around campus? I don't know the numbers. I know kind of where people are sometimes. The LaSalle Street and Marine northwest of campus, I think, are popular. I know that on Irwin Road near the hospital is popular as well. I know that near East Campus towards 9th Street is popular. I think those are kind of the main, the core. I know that further away, most of my knowledge is kind of oriented towards transit. There's some areas that are good for transit near South Square or Patterson Place. They're not walkable to Duke though. You would be catching a bus or driving. Maybe you could bike if you were really comfortable on a bike, but it's not. It wouldn't be what I would recommend unless you were an experienced cyclist. So those are the places I'd check. I'll put up this URL again. This is a good way to kind of see at least what's transit friendly or potentially bikeable to campus, parking.duke.edu/housing. I can't say which places on it are the most popular. But like I said, I think LaSalle, Maureen, Irwin, and near 9th Street are kind of the most popular spots. Let's see. Is there some sort of travel card that should be applied for? How would I go about this, and could it be done before arriving at Duke? I'm not sure if I know exactly what you have in mind. I'm going to answer about the Go Pass. The Go Pass is for the buses in the area, Go Triangle, Go Durham, really anything in the Triangle generally. You don't have to apply for it before you get here. It's pretty easy to just go to a Parking and Transportation Services office. The Science Drive Garage is the main office. Usually it takes a couple minutes to get that permit or that pass. So you can do that when you get here, and then you can ride the buses for free. As for any other kind of transportation, there's not too many other like passes per se. We do have kind of a pilot program that we've done recently where there's some volunteer options in the community, or like the Duke Lemur Center, which is part of Duke but not quite at Duke, where you can, if you sign up for the program, you can get an Uber to those particular locations for free. But that's kind of a more specialized, like you're really only doing that if you're going to go volunteer at a particular place or if you want to go visit the Duke Lemur Center. Let's see. What transportation methods are used most commonly around Duke for students, and which lines and routes are these? What is the frequency and duration of these trips? So on campus, it really depends if you're asking about on campus or off campus. On campus, the bus that goes from East Campus to West Campus is very, very crowded at times. There's articulating buses with 2 buses to students. It runs back to back continually throughout the day. You're usually not waiting very long for that one. But probably, I suspect that most graduate students are not going to East Campus as often. I don't know that for sure. So that's one. If you're going to be near the hospital, I think the H5 is a popular route to kind of move you around campus. But if you're going to be, I'll give another perspective here. If you're going to be parking at the Science Drive Garage, for instance, there's really 2 buses on the current routes that will serve you directly. And that's the PR1, which will take you north into kind of the western edge of West Campus. And then there's the C3, which will take you up through Central Campus and East Campus. So those are some really popular ones that would be useful for a lot of grad students. And you can find, if you want to see the schedules for these do run on schedules. Just, again, go to parking.duke.edu, and you can see a buses and vans option. You can see the list for every potential route. Also, another way to visualize this pretty well, if you go to, and actually this is probably something you might want to look at even outside of a transportation perspective, is maps.duke.edu. It's a pretty cool resource for learning about the area. One of the subsections of maps.duke.edu is transportation, and you can see, for instance, where all the bike racks are. You can see where all the bus routes are. You can see the parking facilities. You can see a lot of interesting things here. This also has stuff that's not related to transportation. I would say check there. And I've mentioned it once before, but I'll mention it again. If you do decide to use transportation on campus or to campus, even the Go Raleigh or Go Triangle, check out Transloc Rider. It's an app for your smartphone, and it tracks the buses in real time on GPS. So you can see you can even say, remind me 15 minutes before this bus is supposed to be here. And your phone will buzz and say, this bus is coming. So it's pretty easy to ride the buses, and they run pretty frequently, especially during the day. And there's a lot of tools that make them easier to use. So next question. What is the average cost per journey and transportation fees each month? This will really depend where you're coming from. If you're going to be riding the bus with the free Go Pass, it's basically no cost. If you're going to be riding a bike, besides occasional maintenance and the cost of the bike itself, it's basically no cost. If you are going to drive, that's where the location matters. I would say there's a go ahead at parking.duke.edu. There is a commuting map that'll show the local areas and about how much it costs. So check that out. It'll tell you, if you're going to be driving from a longer distance, how much you'll spend each month. That's really, I think, all the time we have today. I do want to, thank you for taking the time to learn about these options. If you do want to email or call, I do have contact information available. Of course, if a lot of people are calling, I might respond a little more slowly. But do shoot an email is probably the preferred option. And I'm happy to help you figure out how you're going to get here. Welcome to Duke.